Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found, was blind, but now I see. And all he can think about is what he didn't do. It's cold in a way that can only signify the chambers of a heart growing still, like lava hardening the stairs that lead back to the sea, and he thirsts for any tune but this. Regret's catcalls turn his favorite hymns to minor key mocking. Swing low, sweet chariot approaches to the canter of his bitterness, coming for to carry him away from everything these old soul eyes have ever seen, and he is not sated. His retinas dilate as if gasping to swallow another precious breath before their house is condemned by inspectors who say it isn't fit for human life anymore. These doctors have spent far too long growing well-trained beaks to parrot back the same news until he is more nauseous than usual, force-feeding single servings of "I'm sorry" and 3 weeks to live, repeated for the past 3 years, and you'd think he'd be ready by now. He's read his own death sentence so many times, the syllables fall numb as scalpels through an abdomen pickled with anesthetic, but the difference between those charts in this moment is a difference between world news reports and smelling the breath of the suicide bomber. Wanting to remember a time before chemo, he thinks back to the way he used to sing on Sunday mornings, so vacantly mumbling, "Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come. 'Tis grace that brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home." And with foreshadowing like that, why is this so hard? He's lived his entire life by God's statutes. He is sure of salvation, but why does it have to come now? What about his wife? God rest her earthbound soul, who is younger than he, and God only knows how long she'll be here alone without him. And in one last final irony, this fact is killing him. It burns through him faster than the disease is smoldering like a fuse of the length of a spinal column. He's become a tool shed built of wood pulp and termites, and none of his hammers can fix it now, and that's the hardest part, he decides. Spending decades on Earth working oak and pine with infinite precision, mastering all these fallen trees into pillars he is sure will outlast him, and at last having to test that theory. He remembers now, with the transparency of stained glass to a blind prayer, the time he built an entire church, from the foundations to the arches, buttressed over other voices, singing, "Yea, when this flesh and heart shall fail, and mortal life shall cease, I shall possess within the veil a life of joy and peace." And it's ending now, 1 second at a time. The edges of his vision are curling up like the blackened perimeter of a birth certificate left too close to the fireplace, narrowing down until all he can see is a hospital-issue clock callously delivering old news, but this is nothing compared to the tunnel vision of his memory. Focusing like sunlight, narrowed down to a laser beam to carve away all but the essential mementos from his life, he's become unceremoniously rendered a story in past tense. His mind's telescope then arcs back to what seems most urgent among other stories, and he remembers seeing his father once, seeing echoes of strength gone pale at the edge of a bed that used to mean shelter from thunderstorms and the back end of bad dreams, watching that statue of a man rust. He remembers his father's body fallen inert as lead, arms shriveled like smoked venison, and breath faded to a shadow of a sigh. But most of all, he remembers the eyes, how they seemed so out of place, diamonds on a beach of black sand, how the strength had not departed from those, but rode his last whispers in a wheeze of nicotine to spell passages of scripture from the last sermon he heard on earth, a sermon delivered with his favorite hymn and the apostles' words, "I hope that as always, Christ will be exalted in my body, whether by life or by death." Shining still, those eyes of precious stone were strong even as they shut and returned to dust, hearing his hymn begin to play. "The earth shall soon dissolve like snow, the sun forbear to shine, but God who called me here below will be forever mine." And first, his feet go numb, and it feels like cool streams washing away miles of rocky paths from a body that has finished plodding across his dirt he has loved and fought. His knees are next, leaving him to wade deeply into a baptismal river he cannot see as he watches the ceiling begin to drift open. His hands, thick and calloused hands that knew the value of drill bits, saw blades, and love letters, are opening, lifting, ready to raise offerings toward a suddenly real heaven. His heart pounds one final beat, flushing earthly attachment out of needle-bruised veins to flow backward into IV bags that can be disposed of safely, while he lifts, and with one last breath says, "I am going to my Father's house!" And freed at last from the clumsiness of lips and lungs, he sings.